Tonight, what may be the final battle of the Gulf War. Hundreds of American tanks against what is left of Iraq's Republican Guard. How the war was won by the man who planned it. How the Iraqis believed the U.S. would come by sea. And the Hail Mary that made the difference. The Kuwaitis say the nightmare has ended, and Kuwait City comes alive.
From ABC, this is a special edition of World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
Good evening. The war in the Gulf is virtually over. President Bush is going to talk to the nation tonight at 9 o'clock Eastern Time. The commanding general, Norman Schwarzkopf, said today that the Allied forces have accomplished their mission. The Iraqi army is no longer a threat to the region. The last great battle was being fought today. U.S. tanks and air power overwhelming what used to be called the elite Republican Guard. It has apparently been the conclusive battle, the final blow. We begin at the Pentagon tonight. ABC's Bob Zelnick has been compiling the details.
Officials say the Iraqis lost hundreds of tanks in the battle. Officials say as Allied forces approached from the west, elements of the Guard divisions came forward to meet them. But the Iraqis came under heavy fire, mainly from Apache helicopters and fixed-wing aircraft like the A-10. As they tried to turn and flee, Allied tanks used superior speed to outflank them, and their long-range guns to destroy many of the Iraqi tanks from so far away that the Iraqis could not fire back. The remaining tanks and troop carriers tried to fight their way eastward toward Basra, but officials say many of those were destroyed by pursuing aircraft. Officials say the Iraqi units appear to have been surprised by the Allied attack and once again seemed unable to coordinate their attack because of bad communications. This may explain why the Guards never moved south to defend Kuwait. Pentagon officials say U.S. casualties were light. While the battle involved only 3 of the 8 Republican Guard divisions, the remaining 5 are light infantry. In the view of senior officials here, the Republican Guard as a threat to Iraq's neighbors is finished. Bob Zelnick, ABC News at the Pentagon.
There was another primarily tank battle in which the Iraqis were also virtually wiped out around the airport near Kuwait City. One U.S. commander said more than 100 Iraqi tanks were destroyed there, but he added he wasn't completely sure. After 100, he said, you tend to lose count. Here's ABC's Bill Rediker.
Early this morning, troops of the 1st Marine Division fought to finish off the last Iraqi stronghold in Kuwait City, the international airport. By daybreak, it was over. Marines collected the spoils of war, weapons, ammunition, and an Iraqi helicopter. While the formal, more ceremonial liberation of the city was left up to the Kuwaiti and Saudi armies, the Marines quickly secured the western and southern sections of the city. A combination of smoke from more than 500 oil well fires and bad weather actually helped the Marines.
Visibility sometimes was less than 50 meters, and we surprised them. I think the speed with which we moved surprised them.
American and British armored divisions also used the element of surprise to attack the Republican Guards in western Kuwait. The tank battle ended in the destruction of the southernmost Republican Guard division and the defeat of a division of Iraq's armored reserve. But there were Allied losses as well. This afternoon, an American A-10 tank killer accidentally attacked 2 British armored personnel carriers, killing 9 British soldiers. 4 others were killed by Iraqi fire. The company commander called his men together to talk about the loss.
We took a knock yesterday. But you're all grown men. You're all soldiers. And we go on. I'm very proud of you last night. It didn't seem to affect what we did in the slightest. So thank you very much indeed. We go on, boys.
Throughout the land campaign, American generals say they have benefited from low morale among Iraqi soldiers.
My view is that their heart just wasn't in it. POWs have said this, deserters told us this early on. We don't know why we're here. We don't know why we invaded Kuwait.
Tell them not to worry, they're going to be all right.
The military says it can no longer say with accuracy how many prisoners of war have been collected. Today, the estimate was more than 50,000. Poorly fed and poorly equipped, American officers said Iraqi soldiers had another problem.
And the incoming was from their own artillery trying to stop them from deserting or surrendering.
They're trying to shoot their own people.
They were trying to shoot their own people.
With the Iraqi army on the verge of collapse, American soldiers are already working on the next phase, clearing out pockets of resistance and searching buildings for booby traps and other explosives. Tonight, Central Command will not say when the war will be over, but privately, officers are saying virtually all of the fighting could be finished within a few hours. Bill Redeker, ABC News, Saudi Arabia.
There will be a lot of attempts to put this in military perspective. Military historians tell us today there's never been a war in which one army has suffered so few losses while inflicting such heavy damage on the other. The cost in lives to the U.S., 79 Americans have died since the war began, 44 are missing. In the ground war alone, 28 Americans have now been killed, plus 23 pilots and 28 reservists, including 2 women who died when that Scud missile hit their barracks in Saudi Arabia on Monday. At his briefing today, General Schwarzkopf would not estimate how many Iraqis have died, but he said the number was, his words, large, very, very large. 29 Iraqi divisions have been destroyed or made ineffective. In a moment, General Schwarzkopf will explain how the war was fought and won, and the people of Kuwait celebrate their liberation.
This is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings, brought to you by Preparation H.
I saw my doctor because the pain was so bad. I was afraid I needed surgery for my hemorrhoids. I was itching. The burning was awful. But my doctor said my hemorrhoids weren't serious. I didn't need surgery. He told me it was time I started using Preparation H.
Preparation H helps shrink swelling of inflamed hemorrhoidal tissues and often brings relief from pain, itching, and burning for hours.
What a difference Preparation H makes.
Doctor recommended Preparation H.
Calumet Farm in Kentucky has produced more legendary racehorses than any other stable. Whirlaway, Citation, Alidar. When excellence becomes a tradition, there's no end to the greatness. And it doesn't happen only in horse racing. Ford has set the pace in the auto industry from the outset. And with billions of dollars invested in models like our new Crown Victoria and Grand Marquis, we're going to stay out in front. Ford Motor Company.
41 days since the war started, 4 days of fighting on the ground. From the very beginning, the commander of Allied forces has said that he wanted to keep military operations secret, but when the time was right, he would tell us all how he planned it. Today was the day.
Basically, the problem we were faced with was this. When you looked at the troop numbers, they really outnumbered us about 3-2. And when you consider the number of combat service support people we have, that's logisticians and that sort of thing in our armed forces, as far as fighting troops, we were really outnumbered 2-1. In addition to that, they had about 4,700 tanks versus our 3,500 when the buildup was complete, and they had a great deal more artillery than we do. What we did, of course, was start an extensive air campaign, and I briefed you in quite some detail on that in the past. One of the purposes I told you at that time of that extensive air campaign was to isolate the Kuwaiti theater of operation by taking out all the bridges and supply lines that ran between the north and the southern part of Iraq. That was to prevent reinforcement and supply coming into the southern part of Iraq and the Kuwaiti theater of operation. We also at that time had a very active naval presence out in the Gulf, and we made sure that everybody understood about that naval presence. One of the reasons why we did that is because it became very apparent to us early on that the Iraqis were quite concerned about an amphibious operation across the shores to liberate Kuwait, this being Kuwait City. They put a very, very heavy barrier of infantry along here, and they proceeded to build an extensive barrier that went all the way across the border, down and around and up the side of Kuwait. We continued our heavy operations out in the sea because we wanted the Iraqis to continue to believe that we were going to conduct a massive amphibious operation in this area. I think this is probably one of the most important parts of the entire briefing I could talk about. As you know, very early on, we took out the Iraqi Air Force. We knew that he had very, very limited reconnaissance means, and therefore when we took out his Air Force, for all intents and purposes, we took out his ability to see what we were doing down here in Saudi Arabia. Once we had taken out his eyes, we did what could best be described as the Hail Mary play in football. When we knew that he couldn't see us anymore, we did a massive movement of troops all the way out to the west, to the extreme west, because at that time we knew that he was still fixed in this area with the vast majority of his forces, and once the air campaign started, he would be incapable of moving out to counter this move, even if he knew we made it. I must tell you, I can't recall any time in the annals of military history when this number of forces have moved over this distance to put themselves in a position to be able to attack. Not only did we move the troops out there, but we literally moved thousands and thousands of tons of fuel, of ammunition, of spare parts, of water, and of food out here into this area, because we wanted to have enough supplies on hand so that if we launched this and we got into a slugfest battle, which we very easily could have gotten into, we'd have enough supplies to last for 60 days. Our plan initially had been to start over here in this area and do exactly what the Iraqis thought we were going to do, and that's take them on head-on into their most heavily defended area. At 4 o'clock in the morning, the Marines, the 1st Marine Division and the 2nd Marine Division, launched attacks through the barrier system. They were accompanied by the the Tiger Brigade, U.S. Army Tiger Brigade of the 2nd Armored Division. At the same time over here, 2 Saudi task forces also launched a penetration through this barrier. But while they were doing that, at 4 o'clock in the morning over here, the 6th French Armored Division, accompanied by a brigade of the 82nd Airborne, also launched an overland attack to their objective up in this area, Al Salman Airfield. And we were held up a little bit by the weather, but by 8 o'clock in the morning, the 101st Airborne Air Assault launched an air assault deep in the enemy territory to establish a forward operating base in this location right here. I can't say enough about the 2 Marine divisions. If I use words like brilliant, it would really be an under-description of the absolutely superb job that they did in breaching the so-called impenetrable barrier. It was a classic, absolutely classic military breaching of a very, very tough minefield, barbed wire, fire trenches type barrier. They went through the first barrier like it was water. They went across into the second barrier line, even though they were under artillery fire at the time. They continued to open up that breach, and then they brought both divisions streaming through that breach. We launched another Egyptian Arab force in this location and another Saudi force in this location, again to penetrate the barrier, but once again to make the enemy continue to think that we're doing exactly what he wanted us to do, and that's make a headlong assault into a very, very tough barrier system, a very, very tough mission for these folks here. Once the 101st had their forward operating base established here, they then went ahead and launched into the Tigris and Euphrates Valley. The next 2 days went exactly like we thought they would go. The Saudi forces that came in and took and Arab forces that came in and took these 2 initial objectives turned to come in on the flank heading towards Kuwait City, located right in this area here. The British UK passed through and continued to attack up this flank, and of course the 7th Corps came in and attacked in this direction as shown here. The 24th Infantry Division made an unbelievable move all the way across into the Tigris and Euphrates Valley and proceeded in blocking this avenue of egress out, which was the only avenue of egress left because we continued to make sure that the bridges stayed down. So there was no way out once the 24th was in this area, and the 101st continued to operate in here. The French, having succeeded in achieving all of their objectives, then set up a flanking position, a flank guard position here to make sure that no forces could come in and get us from the flank. By this time, we had destroyed or rendered completely ineffective over 21 Iraqi divisions. Next, please. And of course, that then brings us to today. Where we are today is we now have a solid wall across the north of the 18th Airborne Corps, consisting of the units shown right here, attacking straight to the east. We have a solid wall here again of the 7th Corps, also attacking straight to the east.
I wonder if in an overview, despite these enormously illustrative pictures, you could say what's left of the Iraqi army in terms of how long could it be before he could ever be a regional threat or a threat to the region again?
Well, there's not enough left of it at all for him to be a regional threat to the region, offensive regional threat. As you know, he's got a very large army, but most of the army that is left north of the Tigris-Euphrates Valley is an infantry army. It's not an armored army. It's not an armor-heavy army, which means it really isn't an offensive army. So it doesn't have enough left unless someone chooses to rearm them in the future.
The general used these figures to show just how badly the Iraqi army had been chewed up. More than 3,000 Iraqi tanks destroyed, 88% of his tanks in the Kuwaiti theater, 65% of Iraq's armored vehicles, and 69% of the artillery. We will have more on the Schwarzkopf briefing later in this special edition of World News Tonight, and ABC will broadcast the entire briefing later this evening, right after Nightline, with Ted Koppel reporting from the Gulf. And we'll have more news in just a moment.
Ask me what counts most after 40 years in the car business, and I don't have to think twice. 1, the minivans. We invented them. 2, driver's airbags in every car we build in this country. What do we do for an encore? Put them together. Minivans with a driver's side airbag. Nobody else is doing it. You still have to use your seatbelt with a minivan airbag, but it will save lives. A lot of lives.
Grandma cleaned her dentures with toothpaste. Mom soaked hers with tablets. But I use the denture cleanser of the 90s. Powerful, fast-acting denture foam. The deep cleaning of a tablet, the speed of a toothpaste. Just spray it on. In seconds, denture foam expands, reaching deep down to loosen even stubborn food stains, so you can quickly brush and rinse your dentures sparkling clean. Total time, just 1 minute. It even has minty mouthwash ingredients. Get new denture foam, the deep cleaning of a tablet, the speed of a toothpaste.
Here in Jupiter, a beef stir-fry takes less than 5 minutes and a steak takes less than 10. People of Jupiter call this weightless. Ness. Beef, real food in Jupiter, Florida.
Like a blowtorch in my gut. That's how bad my heartburn felt. I went straight to Riopan.
Lab tests show Riopan Plus 2 starts neutralizing acid on stomach contact in 2.2 seconds.
The blowtorch is out.
Remember, 2.2 seconds. Riopan.
For the first time in 7 months, the Kuwaiti flag is flying over Kuwait City. For thousands of Kuwaitis, it was a day for celebration, but also anger. ABC's Forrest Sawyer is in Kuwait City.
This was the day the people of Kuwait City came back out of the shadows. The day they reclaimed the streets they had left deserted through 7 long months of Iraqi occupation.
I never seen these people in the 7 months. I am seeing everybody of them now, which is the first time.
Allied soldiers rumbled into the city this morning to be greeted as conquering heroes. Women chanted praises for President Bush. American symbols were badges of honor. Kuwait's Day of Freedom brought something old, Saudi soldiers doing traditional sword dances, and something new, children born today, called babies of Tahrir, or liberation. On the road to Kuwait City, U.S. Marines joined the celebration, while inside, at the U.S. Embassy, a Marine reconnaissance team went about the serious business of collecting more Iraqi prisoners of war, straggling into surrender, a sign there is still plenty of work and worry ahead.
For all the celebration here, there is still terror and loss. Thousands of people are still missing their loved ones, picked up by the Iraqis, and they have no idea where they may be.
So they've collected women, children, and young men between the age of 15 to 55. We don't know where they're held. We don't know where they are held. Are they inside Kuwait or are they outside? We don't know.
Bitterness and rage spilled out in the celebration. Saddam's image set afire, his currency an object of contempt. For the first time today, Kuwaitis ventured out to see and touch the images of Saddam's control. Anti-aircraft guns, the bunkers looking out to the sea, the weapons left behind by retreating troops. And they looked ahead, past the celebration to all that must be rebuilt, from the city's amusement park to the royal palaces. Already, Kuwaitis have a feel for the long road to recovery. Citizens of one of the richest oil nations in the world are lining up to buy supplies of gasoline. And there are companies around the world lining up for their share of the contracts that they hope to receive to help the project of rebuilding the infrastructure of Kuwait, a multi-billion-dollar project that, at least unofficially, has already begun starting today. Peter?
Forrest, same question as it was yesterday. What's been your strongest impression today?
Today is a very different impression. You know, I told you yesterday, Peter, that my impression was of the terrible deserted nature of the city and that pall of smoke that hung over everything. The way the city seemed so empty. Today, entirely different. As soon as those APCs and Jeeps came rolling through with the gunfire in the air, people streamed out of their homes. They came out carrying flags, and it was an entirely transformed place. This is a city that has begun to lighten up, has begun to face the fact that there is freedom in the air, and they hope to keep it that way.
Any sign of the Kuwaiti government that's been in exile?
The Kuwaiti government has not yet arrived. In fact, I have seen some low-level government officials, and I think they are a bit frustrated that things are moving as slowly as they are. That is certainly true for a lot of the businessmen who stayed right here and did not leave this country when they were so terribly afraid.
Okay, Forrest, thanks very much. Talk to you again tomorrow. The American embassy in Kuwait City, which Forrest mentioned, will soon be back in business. The State Department says the new ambassador to Kuwait, Skip Ghanim, should be in place within the next few days. He was appointed to the job in January, and he's been working out of Saudi Arabia. He replaces Nathaniel Howell. You remember the ambassador who spent 110 days as a virtual prisoner inside the embassy after the Iraqi invasion. We'll have more news in just a moment.
One company knows the global market so well that it brings you investment opportunities from America and around the world. With a family of mutual funds that give you an intelligent, professional approach to investing, combined with the benefits of diversification. The company that has done all this should come as no surprise. Because at Merrill Lynch, we're bullish on your future.
In most commercials for Choice Hotels International, someone famous pops out of a suitcase. But the star of this commercial is the Choice Yellow Ribbon Fund, created for the American Red Cross. To support our troops and their families, we're donating $5 for every reservation made and used through our special 800 number at a Quality, Comfort, Clarion, Sleep, Roadway, Friendship, or Econo Lodge hotel. The Choice Yellow Ribbon Fund. Call 1-800-4-CHOICE. You'll be doing your part for those who are doing theirs.
Did you hear? Kraft Touch of Butter spread now comes in sticks, so your baking and cooking can have that genuine buttery taste. New Kraft Touch of Butter sticks are made with creamy butter. A touch of real butter makes a real difference.
My grandfather loved the unknown. I want a sure thing. I drive a new kind of Oldsmobile, the all-new Bravada, perfect for this jungle because it's got Smart Trap, a new anti-lock braking and all-wheel drive system that automatically sends power to the wheel that needs it. So I'm ready for the unexpected, whether I'm traveling across the river and into the trees.
This is the new generation.
Or just visiting your old man in the sea.
Bravada, engineered for the unexpected.
How fast does Dristan nasal spray start working to clear up congestion?
Already? That's fast. It's starting to work already.
Dristan nasal spray starts to work in seconds.
Last fall, Saddam Hussein said that his own people would never forgive him if he withdrew from Kuwait. The Soviet Middle East specialist Evgeny Primakov says that Hussein told him last October that after giving Iran back all the territory that Iraq had captured during 8 years of war, he could never give up Kuwait as well. Well, now with his military in a state of collapse, Hussein has tried again to stop the actual fighting. And once again, the answer from the White House is that he has bungled it. Here's ABC's Britt Hume.
At the UN this morning, Iraq's ambassador said its troops were all out of Kuwait and the war should stop.
Well, we believe it is the duty of the Security Council to issue a resolution declaring a ceasefire and an end to all hostilities, and with the understanding that Iraq had already undertaken to abide by all the resolutions.
But at the White House, spokesman Fitzwater cited a cable to the UN from Iraqi Foreign Minister Tariq Aziz. In it, Iraq accepted some of the UN resolutions, but demanded the UN in return lift its trade sanctions. This is still a conditional offer, Fitzwater said, and it falls well short of what is necessary. The president, who met here today with British Foreign Secretary Douglas Hurd, wants the sanctions to continue, though everyone knows that will make it impossible for Iraq to pay war reparations to Kuwait, as the UN has also demanded. Outside later, Hurd explained why.
There are going to be a whole lot of matters which need to be settled after a ceasefire. And during that, I think, during that time, clearly sanctions will need to remain.
That was echoed in more specific terms later by Secretary of State Baker.
We will want to make certain, at least with respect to arms, that there's some sort of constraints upon rearmament and the shipment of arms into that country, and particularly weapons of mass destruction.
Beyond an arms embargo, officials here say they expect to continue a general trade embargo as a lever to try to pry Saddam Hussein out of power. As one senior official here put it, quote, "We would like to do all we can to help the Iraqi people identify the root cause of their problem." Peter?
Britt, there's been an almost desperate scene at the United Nations today with the Iraqi ambassador trying to get a ceasefire. The UN saying again what you've been saying, only when all the resolutions are accepted. And he says the U.S. keeps moving the goalposts back on him. True or not?
Well, officials here would certainly deny that they're doing that, and unfortunately for the Iraqis, if they are indeed trying to stop this with a ceasefire, they keep coming up with these offers that have conditions in them, and whether they really mean them or not, they make it no problem at all for the administration to say no.
Okay, Britt, thanks very much. Great humor at the White House. We'll have more news in just a moment.
I put off going to the doctor. But this burning stomach kept waking me up at night. Finally, I just went. I can imagine how relieved I was when my doctor said Mylanta. He said I had heartburn. And heartburn like mine needed a strong medicine.
Mylanta is strong medicine, strongly recommended. In fact, Mylanta is the antacid doctors recommend most.
My doctor said Mylanta.
Dodge Caravan Plymouth Voyager. The first minivans are still first.
To get rid of her gray, my wife can spend 40 minutes. But I discovered this 5-minute hair coloring.
The revolutionary discovery called Just for Men from the leader in men's hair coloring. Simply apply Just for Men and in 5 minutes shampoo out.
Gray is blended away. The look of my natural color is back in 5 minutes. That was me, and it won't fade or wash out.
My hair takes forever, but you look great in just 5 minutes.
The look of your natural color in just 5 minutes with Just for Men.
Remind you what we said at the beginning. The president is going to speak to the nation at 9 o'clock Eastern time tonight. And when our special edition of World News Tonight continues on most of these stations, we'll hear more of General Schwarzkopf briefing on the war and also take a look at the question of a war crimes trial.
Tonight on Nightline, Ted Koppel reports live from the Gulf. As the Allied steamroller engages what's left of the Iraqi army, Saddam looks for a way out. Tonight.